Hi, welcome to this second bonus video. This is the adventures of Pinocchio design. So this was actually supposed to go into the course originally, but I had to hold it for a bonus video. And the reason is because this introduced some new issues, and this is some of the stuff that maybe you can deal with in Cinema 4D, in After Effects when you're dealing with 3D layers. Sometimes there's some headaches that come along with it, and this was one that definitely gave me something to, not a headache, but just something to think about. And I had to do some creative problem solving. So here is the design that we're going to be dealing with. And it's a little reveal of this. Think of like maybe it's a trailer for Pinocchio, and this would be the end tag scene. And very, very simple, but there's a lot going on here. And I love how the light is illuminating and kind of revealing this stuff. And we're actually faking 3D. None of this is actually 3D extruded text or anything like that. So the original design, though, I want to kind of walk through what Cameron and I talked about. This was the original design. And this is, I forget the name of the designer who designed this, but he made posters for this theater. And there was 3D extruded text, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. Everything's flat except for this text, and you have the light in the top right corner, the adventures of, and some dates and stuff down here. So I thought, let's recreate this, make it 3D, and kind of animate it, and there's just so much you could do with this. So I love the design. So I went into Photoshop and kind of mock this up, and the reason I did it in Photoshop is because I needed to composite the background here. So I went to Unsplash and found this image. This is a very famous castle over in Europe, and found this image, a very, very moody night. It's kind of backlit, but very, very mystical lighting here, and just fantasy type vibes all over the place. So next I cut out the sky and a very soft kind of brushing and feathering here. And I was okay to do that because, no, I'm not going to save that. Because behind that is going to be the actual sky. So this is just a sky image that I got from, again, Unsplash or Pexels, something like that. And drop that in there. And then behind all of that is this texture layer. So I have all of these, those are the three main things that are kind of working together. And then I have another texture layer over top. Again, all just kind of working. If I turn this texture layer over top, it's just adding a little bit of extra texture there. And that was the main composite. And then I added a high pass filter, some noise to really get this grungy and just gritty feel to it. And then there's two paper textures that are adding these little like white specks around the edges here. So a lot of texture. And then I designed the typography. In the typography, I have the Pinocchio design, and I ended up using this Made Mirage typeface. Now, I've talked about Made Type before in some of the other workshops. But if you go to Behance and type in Made Type, hit enter, and make sure you're over here selecting people, and it'll be the first. There's only one Made Type, but they are absolutely fantastic designers when it comes to typefaces. And here is Mirage. So it comes with a few, it comes with 5 weights, and it is free for personal use, but I suggest if you use it if you go down to the bottom here, here's the download link for personal use. But for personal and commercial work, you can go to FontSpring, Creative Market, and on Creative Market, it's $16. So not crazy priced, and it's a really, really nice font. I own a lot of their fonts, and yeah, I love everything they do. So that is the typeface that I'm using for the main Pinocchio design. Then I have, if I double click on this and open this up, this is a wood texture from Adobe Stock's free collection and snag that, and that is clipped to the typography. And then the Adventures of, that is a typeface called Enchanted Land, and that is a free one. If you just type in Enchanted Land font into Google, I think it was like from Dafont or something like that, dafont.com, you'll be able to download that for free. And then I have it colored in this like yellow mustard, you know, dirty mustard type color, and it works together. So lastly, I just added a little bit of glow in Photoshop and just kind of blooming out the highlights. And that was the inspiration. So I had to figure out how to, like, what's the best way to build this in After Effects. And I decided that let me just kick out the basic background, because that's the basis for this poster design, right? If I go back to Pinterest, there's really nothing special going on here. It's just really well executed. And it's a light interacting with a piece of paper, basically, and then this 3D extruded text. So let me export the background and do everything else in After Effects. So just a quick background of where this came from and how we got here. And let's rebuild this with a new comp. So I'm going to type in, you can name this whatever, but I'm just going to do bonus video 2 and tutorial build. And when you download the project file, you will get the original and what we're going to build right now, and see how close I can get to the original one. So 1920, 1080, 24 frames a second, 5 seconds duration, and 3D render is classic 3D. We're not going to be extruding anything in this one. So let's go to, what is it? Pinocchio Background, and drag this in. And it's very large. So let's right click, go to transform, and fit to comp width. And it's actually wider than the full HD. So let's do this again, go to transform, go to fit to comp height. And there you go. Now we're good. Let's set it to 3D while we're here. And let's build the typography. So Command T will get you your type tool. You can also go up here and click on the type tool. Make sure it's the horizontal type tool and type out Pinocchio. Remember, we are on Made Mirage, and the only other thing that I did from, I'm gonna hit P and just drag this over. This was the original weight. I designed it with Made Mirage regular, but when I got into After Effects, I changed this, and I will show you why in 1 second. So I'm going to leave this, but we're going to do that at 250 pixels and no kerning, and the leading doesn't matter because we don't have two lines. So next, let's go and hit the V key, just so we don't mess up our type. I want to hit Command-Shift-H, and let's go to paragraph, make sure that we're centered up here, and then go to align and click center and center. And let's go to pan behind, make sure snapping is checked. And then I just want to center this up so that now we're at 960 and 540. And then let's drag this up and get it something like that. Looks good. That works. Maybe a little bit. So maybe 380. 380 in the Y position. Let's turn it to 3D while we're here. And then let's go to the Adobe Stock. This is the wood texture image from Adobe Stock. Let's drag it underneath, put it into 3D, hit S for scale, and drag this down until it's just outside of our typography layer. So at 18%. And then I want to parent this to my type layer. And the reason I want to do that is because I'm going to be animating the position of this type layer, and I want the wood texture to move wherever this, I want all of this to be tied together. So the next thing is, the reason I have this underneath is because I want to track matte and I want to alpha matte the Pinocchio layer. So now the typography is acting as a stencil cutout for the wood texture. This creates issue number 1, because I need to have this text look like it's 3D. So what we can do is go to layer styles and go to bevel and emboss. And if I turn this on, I get my bevel and emboss and it starts to look like it's 3D, and that's great, but I lose my wood texture. So what I can do is put this to overlay blend mode. And that is going to take whatever differences in the text layer and apply that to the wood texture underneath. But it takes the color of the type as well. So let's go up here. I'm going to bring this up a little bit in the hue, maybe like 12 degrees. And actually, you know what? Let's just leave it at 0. And I'm going to create this like rose colored. So I'm at 0 hue, 32% saturation, and a brightness of 76%. And you can see how this affects, the color affects that wood texture underneath. So what I say, 0, 32, and 76. That works for me. It gets a little bit of this redness back into the wood texture, and it kind of allowed me to color it a little bit. Now let's work with our bevel and emboss. And this is why I switched the weight of my typeface. So first thing I want to do here is set the style to emboss. Smooth is fine, depth 100%, direction up. I'm going to set my size to 6. Use soften at 0, use global light off. And the angle I'm going to set to 12. And that's going to create a highlight on the right side of my typography on all layers. Remember, I want my light to come from the top right corner, exactly how this is done over here. So I need to match that with my bevel and emboss. And altitude's 30 degrees, that's fine. The only thing I did then was I just took my highlight opacity down to 60 from 75. And this looks great. But when you switch it to thin, I feel like it just levels it up and it gives this elegance to it. If you click on your typography layer, this will work. And there we go. And I think the thin just, I don't know, it has this elegance to it that I just absolutely love. And that was why the original design changed. So that is that. So now we can go and create a new type layer. I'm going to type in the adventures of, and then set this to Enchanted Land. And then I'm going to set this down to 50, but then set the kerning up to 160. Spread those letters out just a little bit. And hit P for position, put this into 3D, and then I'm just going to move it over and kind of align it with the edge of the P here, and then keep it, just give it a little bit of space in there, and hit the V key, and that looks good. Maybe pull this down just a little bit. That works. Then the only other thing that I'm going to do is Command-Shift-H to get rid of those bounding boxes. I'm going to pull this up and get this a little bit into this like yellow-green-ish area. And it's a nice contrast from the background, we have the very green background up here and the orange down here. So it's a nice, it pops. You can read it, looks good. So that is all of the design elements. Now let's go get our lighting set up. And if I go to Layer New, Light, and I'm going to do a spotlight, and let's just click OK with those settings right now. Let's get this light set up in the position that we want to kind of land in. So going to my 4 views here, and let's hit P for position. I'm going to move my light using these tools, because if I use this way, you can see even on my top view, it's going to move the point of interest as well. And I don't want that. I want to keep that where it's at. If you move the numbers here, see how it kind of rotates around that point of interest. And I'm going to move this. Let's actually go to one view, go to top, and turn this off, and then hit Command-Shift-H. And I'm going to pull this way out, like 5,000 pixels out. That works for me. And then I'm going to push it over. I'm going to push it over to the right. So I want it to be kind of over here a little bit. And I'm going to push that, yeah, maybe like 4,000 pixels. That'll work. And then I'm going to push it up into Y space. Now this, I need to go back to my active camera. And you can see now that with it that far away, it's covering my entire scene. So I'm going to hit Shift AA here again. Turn this cone angle down to maybe 20 degrees. That works. Turn the cone feather up to 100%. And then I'm going to drag this into the negative so that it rises. And maybe like -900 or so. And I like the position of that because it's giving this little vignette here. And it's just kind of coming right off the edge of that typography. So the only other thing, let me hit AA here, and I can go to inverse squared on the fall off and drag this up. And I'm going to set my intensity to 200% and then drag this up so that the light hits. And around 4,000 pixels looks good. And then let's leave that up. And now I want to introduce this shadow of this typography. So this is where the main issue of this composition comes to the forefront here. With this design and having the wood texture within the typography, I have an issue with the shadow. If I hit AA here, you're going to see what's going to happen. If I turn cast shadows on, and let's actually pull this. I'm going to go -50. Remember, this is parented to, so if I move the type layer, the texture's moving as well. I'm going to pull back the adventures of into -50, and it's just pulling it 50 pixels closer to our camera. Now I have cast shadows on the wood layer, and that's what you're seeing here in the background. If I turn that off and hit AA for my typography layer and turn cast shadows on, nothing happens. And that is the issue that I have. I couldn't figure out a way to get the shadow to cast into the background. So the workaround is duplicate your typography layer. Let's call this shadow layer, Pinocchio shadow layer. I want to pin this, or parent it, I'm sorry, to my original typography. I'm going to pull it underneath everything. I want to right click, go to layer styles. I want to remove all of the layer styles, and you see instantly that this pops up with the shadow. So how does this work? If If I hit AA, cast shadows is on, accept shadows and accepts light is on. And as soon as I turn off that layer style, you see that the shadow comes into play. So what this is basically I'm eliminating, and I can pull this down into black, and it is set to overlay blend mode. I can set this to normal, and it's basically just creating this shadow for me. If I turn this to off, I can set this to cast shadows only, and now I have there's no typography. It's just going to be the shadow of that layer, and that was my workaround for that. Now, the other thing is I did leave the Adventures of. I left that alone. I did not put a shadow on that. Because it's regular typography, I didn't think it needed a shadow. The other thing too that I played around with was with this light and cast shadows on, the shadow darkness, I could crank this up if I wanted to and crank up the diffusion. So I'm going to leave this as 0. I'm going to put this back to 100 and leave it there for right now. And we might change it later on. So let's go up here to Layer New, Camera, and now that we have all of this set up, let's get our animation going. So I'm going to set my camera to a yellow layer, and that way I can see where it is in the comp. And I'm going to change my spotlight to be orange and leave that at the top. And then this here, I'm actually going to hit Command-Shift-Y or go up here to Layer, Camera Settings, and I'm going to change this to a 2-node camera. So if I go to 2 views horizontal, I want my point of interest here, and I'm going to kind of rotate around this. It's going to be a simple position keyframe. So let's set a keyframe here and drag this out to maybe 4 seconds. That's going to be where our camera kind of finishes off. And let's drag this over to the right. And let's zoom in. That works for me. Let's go to 1 view. That works. So we're just kicking it off to the side just a little bit. And let's go to, I'm just going to go to 3rd so I can start playing this quickly. You can see my shadow goes away on that 3rd, but if I set it to full, it comes back. So maybe we'll go to, yeah, half it goes away too. So the shadow is still there. And let's work with this light position as well. I'm actually going to leave this on full to animate this light because there's a few things I want to change. So I want to change position, but I want to, my point of interest is set directly to this layer here. And if I go to 2 views horizontal and go to top view, I actually want to kind of set this out a little bit here. So you can see when I do that, when I move it away, you get this effect here. And what I want to do is let's end this on that, and let's pull this more to the side. Let's make sure we're designing on this. Yep, okay. So I'm going to move that over just like that. I'm looking at this shadow here, and it's not this far away in the original design. So my position is off here for some reason. And I'm just going to leave it at that for right now. But this is a big thing of make sure you place your light to get the shadow where you want it to be. But anyhow, let's animate the position. And I want to start it closer and get this shadow kind of moving. And also animate it closer that way. All right. And then let's go to light options. I want to hit cone angle and cone feather and intensity. And I'm going to drag all of these out while holding shift. It'll snap to where that last one was. And I want to pull this down to, let's just go to 0. And actually, let's go to 100 just so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to make this pretty wide. And cone feather down to 50%. Yeah, let's do 12 down to 0. And now if I go to one view, go to half, it's going to kind of open up the light as we are moving our camera around. So that works. That's good. Let's go to the Pinocchio layer and adventure of, and let's hit P for position. And since they're both on 50, I want this to go maybe like minus 250 and minus 150. Maybe let's go like minus 125. So they're going to be moving back. Okay. All right, and the last main thing we have to animate here is on the, if I hit Shift AA, oops, I'm sorry, not AA, I want UU, and it's going to give me the layer styles. What I want is the highlight opacity. I want this to be, maybe we drag this out to 2 seconds, and around 12 frames, let's take this down. So that it is, maybe we'll start it off 0. So basically, I don't want the bevel and emboss to be introduced until the lighting is introduced, and that's what I'm getting at here with this. The other thing is, we can now, if you hit U, you can get all your keyframes here. And what I want to do is just hit F9 to easy ease all of them. But then some of these I'm going to change differently. So this one I'm going to pull back a little bit so that it takes a little bit longer to get to full strength. And then all of these other ones, I'm going to pull all the way up, make 0. Let's do the camera position. Make this 0. And pull this all the way up. That might be a little too aggressive. So maybe something like that. So I want to, maybe we'll do like an 80% influence. You see the little influence as I drag this. So let's try and keep it around 80%. And I'll do that on this position one. You drag this handle while holding shift, you can get it down to 80% influence. That works. I want to do it on the position of Pinocchio as well. Make this 0 and make this one 80%. And 80%. Select and drag and get all of these to 0. So now we should have this camera motion where it kind of starts out fast and slows down a little bit. Now, the only other thing is this spotlight is way too dim. So let's go in here and take the intensity up to like 325%. Looks good. And the other thing is, you see how this wood texture, it kind of looks weird in the beginning here. So let's see if I can do T for opacity and maybe just take the opacity, go to 0, go to 1 second and take this up then. Maybe we'll go to 2 seconds. And then select this and same thing, do F9 to easy ease. And then take this, oops, to like 80%, that works. It'll keep it, basically, it'll just keep it in the shadows a little bit longer. Maybe pull this out to 3 seconds. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So I want to watch the, I'm watching the highlight opacity and the opacity of the wood texture layer and make sure that everything looks good with that, which it does. It looks like it looks pretty good. It's kind of, both of them are being introduced as the light's being introduced. So the only other thing with this is, you could go and now fine tune everything. So maybe we want to introduce a little bit more color into that typography and get it a little bit more of that warm glow that we have. The other thing is we can create the Command Option Y for an adjustment layer. And let's call this grade effects. And we can use 2 effects on here. Let's go to glow. And there's 2 types of glows that I want to create. I want to create a tight one for the background. And actually, let's leave this on 1 so we can see what we're doing here. And then, see, it's picking up a little bit of this type in here too. So I want to play with my threshold and see where I need to set this stuff. All right, and I'm just pulling down the threshold until I can see where it's kind of interacting. So if I take this down, 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 maybe we'll do 49%. Take the glow radius way up, like 150. That looks good. And then take the intensity down to maybe like 0.2. All right, let's duplicate this. let's take the threshold up, and this is going to be affecting kind of, if I take this back to 1.5, let's turn this first one off. I want to affect the typography and not so much of the background on this last one. So let's pull this up. You see how it's hitting the typography layers here? So glow radius, let's pull out to maybe like 40 and then take the intensity down and maybe like 0.5, something like that, 0.6, just to kick a little bit of glow in there. I'm gonna pull this up a little bit and go to 0.1. Yeah. So just a little bit of glow in that background. And then the last thing I added was just a Lumetri Color. And all I did for this was go to the Creative tab, and I set it on this Fuji F125 Kodak 2393. And it just introduces a ton of contrast. So let's drop this way down. Maybe start at like something like 20. And that looks pretty good. So it's just kind of tightening this up and making it punch a little bit. And then the basic correction, I added another 10 to the overall contrast. And maybe we could go 0.1 and brighten it up just a little bit, maybe like 0.2. And maybe we go to 25. Yeah. So that looks really, really sharp. I love the effect of that. And you can see without the glows and the Lumetri. Now the glows may be a little hot down here, but I didn't want the background to fall off into nothing. So, you know, maybe I pull this down to 0.08 and it just gets rid of that little bubble there that was there. And yeah, that is the final effect. So you have your light turning on, you have the wood texture bringing up an opacity, you have the bevel and emboss getting stronger with the highlight effect as the light gets brighter, and you have the camera rotating around as well as the light moving and getting stronger. So a very simple animation, but a very effective one. So that is the final animation. The only thing I might do is, see, I have this parallaxing, and I actually might bring this down. So these are my two. This one's starting at, the Adventures of is starting at -250, and maybe I start that at like -175. I don't want to have it move so much. Like, I want a little bit of parallax. I don't want it to be completely different than the Pinocchio. I want them to move together, but they are moving back closer to the background, which is at a position of 0. And with the light moving and the type moving and the camera moving, that's what gives this nice effect between the typography and the shadow layer. And you get some nice kind of parallaxing and some nice motion there. So once again, I did build it a little bit different than the original one. There's so many ways to do these things, and I don't know if I like this one better or if I like the original one better, but always fun to kind of experiment. So that is it for the entire course with the 2 bonus videos, and I hope it just shows that there's so many possibilities that you can do with this. It's just limited to what your creativity can do, and hope you guys had fun learning and watching and kind of going on this journey with me into all things 3D. And with that, that wraps up this course. My name is Ryan with Motion Science, and we will see you next time. Take it easy.